6 years ago, NASA scientists discovered life within the solar system and launched an autonomous space station. Upon its return, the station crashed somewhere in Mexico. Shortly afterward, unfamiliar life forms began to appear in the area, leading to the closure of an entire region. As unknown creatures caused civilian casualties, the militaries of two countries united to protect the population that couldn't be evacuated. One day, photojournalist Andrew Calder sets out for Mexico to document the lives of people living near the infected zone. He photographs widespread destruction and the consequences of an undeclared war between worlds. During this time, his boss, the editor-in-chief, tasks him with finding and bringing back his daughter Samantha, who is on vacation in Mexico. Andrew finds Samantha in a hospital, where she ended up after a night attack on the city. Fortunately, Samantha is only slightly injured, an arm bruise that doesn't prevent her from embarking on the journey home immediately. Andrew was very displeased with this assignment, as he had been waiting for 3 years for an opportunity to enter the zone and create the report of his life. However, he doesn't dare argue with his boss. He escorts Samantha to the train station, where she calls her father to let him know they are about to board the train. Her father asks to speak with Andrew, reminding him that his daughter is his top priority. Resigned to his fate, Andrew leads Samantha to the train. Along the way, he explains that he's been photographing everything he encounters, hoping to create an eye-catching report. Samantha, when asked about her activities, avoids the topic but flashes an expensive engagement ring, hinting at her social status. They travel all day. Samantha naps while Andrew captures intriguing scenes: military aircraft overhead, derailed train cars, and explosions lighting up the sky. Suddenly, the train halts due to issues up ahead and must turn back. Andrew suggests they continue to the port on foot since it isn't far. Though nervous, Samantha agrees. They soon arrive at a small house and knock on the door. A young woman invites them in, showing them a map of the area and explaining how to reach the port, which is about 100 kilometers away. However, the rails ahead are damaged from bombings, so they'll need to find a vehicle. If they don't make it to the port in 2 days, they'll be stranded for at least 6 months, as the coastline will close. The couple is offered a modest dinner. During the meal, Andrew entertains the hostess's child, prompting her to assume they are married, a notion they quickly dispel. The next morning, Andrew photographs children playing with gas masks and animals, as though there's no danger nearby. Their mother provides the travelers with some food and water, wishing them a safe journey. Andrew and Samantha hitch a ride on a truck and later arrive at a bus stop. While waiting for the bus, Andrew surveys the surroundings, questioning locals about creature attacks. He's shown remnants of military vehicles and destroyed buildings. Samantha is uneasy about Andrew profiting from others' tragedies, but he explains that her father pays more for photos of deceased children than smiling faces, and he needs to make a living. After all, he doesn't cause tragedies, he merely documents them. Eventually, they reach the port, where they can take a ferry to the U.S. However, a ticket costs $5,000. Andrew notices people in the waiting area, but the clerk explains that they hope to cross to the U.S. via land, a perilous journey. Andrew manages to buy a single ticket for Samantha on a ferry departing early the next morning and has just enough money left for a hotel. At the hotel, Andrew's room isn't ready yet, so he waits in Samantha's room. They chat about various topics, discovering they enjoy each other's company. When Samantha goes to shower, Andrew calls home, leaving a voicemail wishing someone a happy birthday and promising to call again soon. Later, they explore the town, sampling local delicacies and reveling in the festive atmosphere. But when they visit a local church, they are struck by the somber sight of photos of those killed in alien attacks, surrounded by candles. Many of the deceased are children. Samantha is deeply affected, and Andrew, horrified by the scale of loss, suggests leaving quickly. At a cafe, Samantha shares her plans for tomorrow, returning home, getting married, and living happily ever after. Andrew escorts her to her room and attempts to stay the night, but Samantha laughs and bids him goodnight. Alone, she removes her engagement ring, gazing at it thoughtfully as if making a decision. Andrew heads to a bar, continuing to drink and socialize. The next morning, Samantha knocks on Andrew's door, offering coffee before her departure. She notices a local woman in his bed and runs off. Andrew chases after her and catches up at the port. Confused by her reaction, he realizes he still has her passport and ticket. Returning to his room, he finds the woman and her belongings gone, along with Samantha's documents and ticket. Andrew tries in vain to locate the thief and then pleads with the port clerk for another ticket, but there are none left, and the ferry won't sail again. Samantha suggests taking the land route, but it costs twice as much since they must pay for transport and guides, and they have no money. Desperate, Samantha offers her engagement ring, which covers the cost of the illegal journey. The pair begins their trek, traveling by car, boat, and then car again. They witness people surviving in the zone simply because they have nowhere else to go and marvel at their resilience. Eventually, they reach a boat whose reluctant owner agrees to take them downriver to meet guides for the jungle road. Samantha and Andrew board, passing burnt ship skeletons and bombed-out settlements. At one stop, they hear a terrifying roar from the jungle. A soldier readies his weapon, while Andrew urges Samantha to hurry back to the boat. As they continue downriver, Andrew reveals he has a son who will turn 6 tomorrow. However, the boy lives with his mother and her partner, so Andrew doesn't see him often. Suddenly, the boat's engine breaks down, leaving them stranded until nightfall. In the darkness, they hear the eerie sounds of monsters in the jungle. Then, a strange object floats in the water nearby, a downed fighter jet. As people investigate with flashlights, massive tentacles emerge, seemingly toying with the wreckage before pulling it into the river's depths. Finally, the engine roars to life, and the boat hurries away from the terrifying location. They travel through the night, and as dawn breaks, Andrew notices the riverbanks littered with wrecked boats and ships, stained with the blood of their occupants. Soon they disembark, greeted by a group of armed guides. This unsettles Andrew, as they hadn't agreed to such an escort. The boatman assures them these are friends, explaining that weapons are necessary in the jungle. Suddenly, a dreadful roar emanates from the bushes, freezing everyone in place. Moments later, a stray cow emerges, relieving the tension. The group eventually stops to camp for the night. Around the campfire, the guides explain that they are only 90 minutes away from the wall separating the U.S. from Mexico, a structure built after the alien invasion. However, it's too dangerous to proceed at night, and they're also waiting for another family to join them. The men laugh at the American government, mocking the wall as a prison they built around themselves. The guides share their experiences, describing monsters over 100 meters tall, which the wall would never stop. They mention that these creatures are less threatening on land, but far more dangerous in water. They despise planes, which the Americans used to spray chemicals in attempts to eradicate the aliens. The guides also reveal that all the surrounding trees are infected. They show Andrew and Samantha glowing fungal growths on the trunks, alien offspring that first sprout on trees, then travel via rivers to the oceans, where they mature and grow to massive sizes before returning to forests to lay eggs. The entire zone is contaminated. Returning to the campfire, the group lies down to rest. Alone with Samantha, Andrew apologizes for losing her passport so foolishly. She reassures him that she isn't upset. Andrew kisses her injured hand and suggests they get some sleep, as the next day will be grueling. As they doze off, one of the guides pulls Andrew's camera from his bag, but doesn't get a chance to examine it. Their radios suddenly crackle, and military planes roar overhead. Everyone awakens, realizing danger is near, and the camp is packed up in haste. The group drives into the night, the roar of monsters echoing from the jungle. The driver stops, urging everyone to remain silent. But out of the darkness, tentacles emerge, grabbing a nearby truck, lifting it high and smashing it to the ground moments later. Andrew shields Samantha, holding her close as the men leap from the vehicle and open fire. Amid the chaos, Andrew decides to stay hidden in the car. Soon, a massive squid-like creature with countless tentacles looms nearby before moving on. At dawn, Andrew ventures out to search for survivors. His calls go unanswered. He finds a truck lodged high in a tree and eventually stumbles upon the mutilated bodies of the guides. Fighting nausea, he retrieves his camera and a respirator from one of the corpses. Samantha, stepping out of the vehicle, follows Andrew and finds him near a truck with the deceased family. Among the dead is a little girl. Andrew instinctively reaches for his camera but stops, placing a few flowers on the girl's body and covering her with his jacket. Taking another respirator from a male victim, Andrew leads Samantha away, heading in the direction the guide had indicated the previous night. The pair travels most of the day. As dusk approaches, Samantha steps aside for a moment and stumbles upon an ancient, overgrown Mayan pyramid in the jungle. Andrew and Samantha climb to the top, where they have a clear view of the massive wall separating Mexico and the U.S. Andrew reflects on the strangeness of viewing America from the outside. Tomorrow they'll be home, leaving behind all the horrors they've witnessed, including the little girl. Samantha recalls a funny childhood memory, and they laugh together, as if releasing all the terror that had weighed them down. Andrew suggests they rest, knowing the final push to reach the U.S. awaits them at dawn. As the sun rises, they approach the checkpoint, only to find it abandoned and the power out. The nearby town lies bombed out, with no signs of life. Searching for someone, they decide to don their respirators as military planes patrol overhead. Exploring a house, they discover the corpse of a dead monster on the roof. They hear sounds and see an elderly woman with a stroller. Calling out to her, they realize she's unhinged. She mimics Samantha's words before wandering away. Continuing on, they spot a seemingly intact gas station with electricity. Stopping there, they call for a military patrol. The operator instructs them to stay put and wait for help. While resting in the station's small shop, they reminisce about childhood games, realizing their plans for the future have shifted. Andrew calls his son, who shares what he wants for his birthday, and Samantha assures her father she's safe and will be home soon. Later, Andrew steps outside while Samantha sits on the shop floor. Suddenly, she notices alien limbs reaching nearby. Tentacles stretch toward a television, and Samantha realizes the working screen is attracting the creature. She quickly switches it off, and the tentacles retreat. Horrified, they watch as massive creatures appear from the darkness, their tentacles entwining as they emit sounds. Mesmerized, Andrew and Samantha witness their mating ritual, awed by the colorful displays on their bodies and limbs. When the creatures part ways, Andrew and Samantha realize they don't want to separate. They share a kiss just as the military patrol arrives to escort them. En route to the city, they are attacked by another creature, which the soldiers eliminate with helicopters. 7 years have passed since aliens first appeared on Earth. Michael Parkas, an ordinary guy from Detroit, didn't want to waste his life in a factory or selling illicit substances. When recruiters arrived, he joined the army, now tasked with combating the monsters proliferating across the planet. Humanity is deploying every available method and weapon to reclaim their home from the invaders. While airstrikes are highly effective, they also kill civilians and infected cells. As a result, insurgent groups have risen, seeing the American military as a greater threat than the aliens themselves. Confronted with unexpected resistance, the army is forced to neutralize these zealous opponents who hinder efforts to send the monsters back to hell. Sergeant Freder was one of those soldiers who excelled at this kind of work. He followed orders without hesitation, eliminating rebel leaders while operating undercover deep within infected zones. On one such mission, after neutralizing a field commander, Freder successfully escapes the scene in a Middle Eastern city and returns to a U.S. Army base where he prepares for his next assignment. Meanwhile, in Detroit, Parkas drives through the city, reflecting on his friends, none of whom wanted to stay in the dying town. Instead, they all chose to enlist in the army. Parkas stops at the house of his friend, Frankie, who has a family. In their childhood, it was in this house that Parkas would hide after running away from yet another foster home. Now they must hurry to the recruitment office to get the best fight of their lives. Before that, they pick up their third friend, Williams, who is at the hospital witnessing the birth of his son. Overjoyed, Williams invites Parkas to hold the newborn. Williams' wife expresses her hopes for a world without cruelty surrounding her child. The fourth member of their group, Carl Inkelar, joined them during training camp. Williams' wife bids the men farewell, urging them to come back alive and well. Carl promises to bring her husband home. Williams, asking his son to grow strong and protect his mother, departs with his friends. Later, Parkas and Frankie reminisce about their childhood and how they always had each other's backs during schoolyard fights. Now they are about to face something far more serious. Watching kids playfully scuffling on a basketball court, they join in, seeing it as perhaps their last carefree moment of boyish fun before entering a world of war. That evening, determined to make the most of their last day in the city, the friends attend an illegal fight between a trained dog and an alien juvenile. The crowd enthusiastically cheers for the dog, but the alien proves stronger and more agile. When the dog is killed, one of the spectators shoots the alien, ending the fight. Later, the group heads to a bar, drinking and celebrating the night in the company of approachable women. The next day, they find themselves in the Middle East, immediately thrown into combat against alien creatures. For the first time, Parkas sees the monsters up close and struggles to suppress his fear, while others mask their terror with jokes. Their helicopter barely escapes the tentacles of one alien, thanks to the pilot's skill, while other airborne units bomb the enemies. After the skirmish, the team arrives at the base, where they are greeted by Sergeant Freder, their new commanding officer. Freder advises the recruits to get used to the constant explosions and keep their emotions in check, as survival on any battlefield, and especially this one, depends on it. Second Sergeant Forrest briefs them on the additional threat posed by local rebels, who resent the civilian casualties caused by U.S. bombings. The soldiers are warned to always stay sharp and maintain their gear, as they are now part of the Tiger Shark squad. The newcomers quickly integrate into the team, showing no leniency, not even to Sergeant Forrest, who admires their spirit, knowing such traits are essential in real combat. On their first patrol, Freder demonstrates what to watch for, explaining that seemingly harmless civilians can be insurgents. He emphasizes the importance of staying calm and treating locals with respect to avoid unnecessary hostility. While always remaining vigilant, even children can be dangerous. Parkas struggles to believe local teenagers are capable of killing, but he tries to follow orders. Unexpectedly, the team receives an assignment to investigate a farmer's house on the outskirts, where signs of rebel activity have been reported. Upon arrival, they observe men unloading containers, which could contain anything from water to explosives. Freder decides to wait until nightfall. Under the cover of darkness, the soldiers approach the house but notice a group of aliens nearby. The homeowner, spotting the soldiers, confronts them angrily. He accuses them of bombing his compatriots' homes, recounting how he lost his family to their attacks. Frater demands the man be removed from the area, but his shouting forces the soldiers to strike him to silence him. During the argument, one of the massive creatures passes dangerously close. The soldiers open fire, killing it, while others destroy additional targets with rockets. After a brief but intense night battle, the team returns to base. Frater reprimands the recruits, furious that no one noticed the civilian man. He warns them that their bodies could have been sent home in flag-draped coffins if not for their luck. After the scolding, Frater and Forrest share a drink to unwind. They discuss their families, and Frater calls home. He misses his wife and daughter deeply after 8 deployments, pleading to hear his daughter's breathing as she sleeps. 3 months into their service, Frater's team is tasked with rescuing 4 soldiers reported missing in a high rebel activity area. Before the mission, Frater shows his soldiers photos of the missing men for identification. Carl takes a group photo, cracking jokes, and the team heads out. After reaching a designated point, they switch to vehicles. On the way, they are stunned to see a pack of young aliens running alongside their transport, offering a clear view of their sheer numbers and physicality. Suddenly, the convoy hits a hidden explosive device, disabling both vehicles and instantly killing Forrest and 2 others. Williams, dazed by the blasts, crawls out of the wreckage but steps on another mine, which detonates, severing his legs. As the team comes under fire from rebels, Frater orders them to establish defensive positions. While soldiers return fire, Parkus carries Williams to the cover of a nearby dilapidated house, then rejoins the fight. Carl desperately tries to stabilize Williams but struggles to keep him alive. Sergeant Frater attempts to call for reinforcements, but he is informed that no support is available at the moment. Meanwhile, Williams succumbs to his injuries, leaving his friends in shock. Frater forces the group to leave Williams' body behind as orders come in to proceed to a designated point where an evacuation helicopter will soon arrive. Saying a brief farewell, the 4 remaining soldiers sprint through the desert and eventually find shelter in the ruins of nearby village homes. Exhausted and overwhelmed by the recent events, they collapse, questioning whether the rebels were targeting them or the aliens. Suddenly, a sniper's bullet kills Carl, and Frankie is injured before a group of rebels surrounds them. Realizing they could be executed on the spot, Frater orders Parkus to surrender. The rebels transport the captured soldiers to their hideout, tying them up and forcing them to watch as Frankie bleeds out before their eyes. Parkus screams, unable to bear witnessing his friend's death, while Frater commands Frankie to look him in the eyes and die with dignity. Frankie complies, and as Parkus tips his chair back in anguish, he hits his head and loses consciousness. Later that night, an alien attacks the bunker. Seeing the threat, a large group of rebels flees in vehicles. 2 remaining rebels approach the captives, intending to execute them. One is distracted by the commotion outside, while the other carelessly moves too close to Frater. The sergeant kicks him to death, frees Parkus, and orders him to head to the courtyard where some bikes are parked. Frater stays behind to check the rest of the building. Parkus says a quiet goodbye to Frankie before heading to the courtyard. On his way, he kills a guard. Outside, he sees the alien tearing apart the roof of the building, but is so mentally drained from the past 24 hours that he doesn't even think to run. Instead, he covers his head and waits for his fate. Frater appears and pushes him toward the bikes. They escape together, determined to complete their mission. Morning comes as the 2 soldiers ride through the desert. During a brief stop, Frater tries to snap Parkus out of his stupor, realizing the young soldier is still in shock and struggling to process the situation. Frater explains that they still have 80 kilometers to cover and must find the 4 missing soldiers, or their friends' sacrifices will have been in vain. When their fuel runs out, they continue on foot, heading east. That night, they take refuge in a bombed-out house. Frater questions Parkus about his family, but Parkus admits he doesn't know much about his biological father. Frater shares his own story, revealing that every time he returns from deployment, he takes the bus home and waits for his wife and daughter to open the door. On his last return, he saw fear in his daughter's eyes because she didn't recognize him, despite his belief that he's protecting her. At dawn, they move on and come across a wrecked school bus in the desert. While Frater searches the belongings of dead children for water, Parkus inspects the bus and discovers a boy still alive. He carries the boy outside, but realizes he may not be able to save him. Frater suggests helping the boy their way by ending his suffering. Parkus watches as Frater tries to smother the child, but when the boy grasps Parkus's hand, Parkus pulls the sergeant's hands away. Frater tearfully tries again, but Parkus stops him once more. Picking up the boy, Parkus stands uncertainly, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, a group of riders approaches. One of them, a woman, takes the boy from Parkus. The soldiers raise their hands, expecting to be killed, but the riders spare them, instead leading them to a river. There, the men wash off the blood and grime of the desert, regaining a semblance of composure. The soldiers are taken to a local village, where they observe the simple life of the residents and share in a communal meal. The villagers treat them kindly, offering freshly prepared food. As night falls, the soldiers are amazed to see aliens peacefully roaming near the settlement. Later, they sit by the fire, listening to the villagers sing. Parkas watches as the villagers bury the deceased children. Frater, peeking into a tent, sees the boy from the bus dying and breaks down, weeping by the child's side. For the first time, he questions his purpose on earth and laments abandoning his faith in God. Meanwhile, Parkas follows a funeral procession and catches up with the boy's mother. She fearlessly approaches a hill where the corpse of a dead alien lies. Another living alien appears, seemingly trying to awaken its fallen companion. When it realizes the effort is futile, it releases a swarm of glowing spores from the deceased. The spores drift to the ground, burrow into the soil, and immediately begin to sprout new alien life. Parkas and the woman sit silently in the darkness, watching the hauntingly beautiful spectacle unfold. In the morning, Parkas wakes up to the woman gently stroking his head, as if silently thanking him for his actions. Later, he returns to the village, where Frater greets him with a punch to the face, accusing him of forgetting their mission. Dragging Parkas to the tent where the boy's body lies, Frater sternly reminds him that sentimentality has no place in their duty. The men set out for a nearby settlement. Along the way, they encounter a boy carrying a tin can, inside of which he is hiding a small alien. Parkas is baffled by this, but the boy releases the creature, which scurries off into the sand, reminding them that it, too, is just a child. Reaching the neighboring settlement, Frater spots a child playing with a real assault rifle. Demanding to know where the weapon came from, he follows the boy to a house. Inside, they discover the bodies of local villagers wrapped in shrouds, victims of a recent bombing. Among them are the remains of the 4 American soldiers they had been searching for. Realizing his mission has failed, Frater storms into the room where the surviving residents are gathered. He furiously demands to know who killed his men, shouting that he has no business being on this cursed land when he should be at home with his wife and daughter. Losing control, he brandishes his weapon, threatening the villagers. When they fail to understand his words, Frater, consumed by rage, shoots one of the men. The others cower, trapped with nowhere to hide in the cramped room. Realizing that Frater is on the verge of massacring the entire family, including the children, Parkas has no choice but to shoot him to stop the slaughter. The terrified villagers flee, leaving Parkas alone with the wounded sergeant. Frater stumbles out into the street, heading toward the evacuation zone, with Parkas trailing behind. Overhead, a flock of birds takes flight. Frater gazes at them, then tears off his military uniform before collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Emotionally drained, Parkas looks on as an enormous alien monster emerges from the earth with a deafening roar. At the same time, the evacuation helicopter appears in the sky, rescuing Parkas and taking him back to base. The film is good, but it deceives the audience, as its primary focus is not on monsters, but rather on an unflinching portrayal of the brutality and futility of war. It vividly depicts the grim lives of soldiers, stranded in the middle of nowhere and fighting an enemy they barely understand. The very people they are ostensibly protecting often turn on them, killing their comrades. Even Sergeant Frater, seemingly the perfect combat machine, eventually succumbs to the psychological toll. By the end, the line between human and monster blurs, leaving the audience questioning, who are the real monsters here?